Thank you, Austria.
Oh, great. Okay, this in. So, my name is David, and I am an alcoholic. And I didn't want to give my suspect a lengthy introduction. I could have quite easily, but I wanted him to introduce himself. And I think he did that quite well. So, I was born a poor black child. No, actually, I was born into a upper middle class family, and my dad worked for the FBI, and my mom was a bookkeeper, and I had an older sister, an older brother, and a younger sister growing up. And my dad was, I'm pretty sure, one of us, but he never found this fellowship. I don't know if he ever looked for it or not, but he never found it. And my dad died at 59 years old under the wheels of a Metro bus. My granddad died at 55 of asthma exacerbated, thank you, by alcoholism. And thanks a power much greater than me, I'm not looking forward to either of those deaths or any other alcoholic-related death. My kidney might eventually kill me, kidneys or whatever, because I've abused them so hardly. But they're not yet, so you know. Life is today so much different. So when I was in school, I'm sure you've never heard an alcoholic say, "Oh, I never felt like I fit in," but that's what it was. And so my first suspension from school was in the first grade for fighting, and that was the first. So what happened in my life was that until I was 5 years old, I was a pretty happy kid. And I don't know what happened, but around 5 things started changing. And then when I went to school, I kind of became antisocial. And we had these 2 neighbor kids, and their mom was Japanese. Their dad had married her when he was a member of the occupation in Japan. And kids at school would tease them and stuff. And that was why I got suspended the first time. There was kids around my friend Billy, called him a slant-eyed son of this, and a Jap and all kinds of other stuff. And so I just ran into the circle and started wailing on kids, because I had that. I already had the little man's complex, So if you looked at me or someone I loved cross-eyed, it was on. I was going to attack, and it never seemed to bother me getting beat up, In fact, consequences never really landed that hard on me. I mean, they landed hard, but I didn't seem to really give a damn. So my first drink that I know about was at 1 week shy of 2 years old. My folks were having drinks, and they went out on the balcony to admire the view, and I climbed on the table and finished their drinks for them. So then the next time I altered my state of consciousness, the first time I did it intentionally, I used other substances, and I became quite fond of them. But when other substances weren't available, alcohol was always around. And so alcohol kind of threads my whole story together. And, I was never an alcoholic. I was just a party guy. And unlike my suspect, the concept of less never crossed my mind. It was more. I always wanted more. And that was actually where I was before I even started altering my state of consciousness. I remember my sweet grandma used to send me nice clothes for Christmas and stuff. And they weren't what I wanted, so I didn't appreciate them, And when I got stuff, it was never enough, I never had enough of anything. And So at age 11, I started getting high, and between 11 and just short of 20, when I got arrested for my first felony, I was arrested 29 times. So when I went to court on that first felony, I didn't get probation or anything like that. I got sentenced to prison, and I did about 2 years and on a 6-year sentence, and I got out. And in the next 2 years, I violated parole 6 times. And on the 6th time, they said, "Well, you're going back," and so they sent me back, and I spent about 3 years there that time, and got out, and I finished my parole, and since I was sentenced under an act called the Youth Corrections Act, so my conviction was set aside once I completed that. And I met a woman shortly after I got out, and we had sex, and I always thought sex meant love, so we just kind of glommed onto each other. And we'd like to talk about how we take hostages, but for me it was a mutual hostage taking. So she had a son, and he was about 16 months old when we got together. His name's Jeremy. He's a beautiful man now. But we had 3 more kids down the road. So when I first was in touch with the fact that I was definitely an alcoholic, I used to get up in the morning and drink a 6-pack of Old English 800 tall boys of 16 ounces for breakfast, right? And this was about 1982, I think. I got up one morning and I drank 3 of them, and I was just shit-faced. Mm-hmm. So I didn't know what that meant, but I knew it probably wasn't good, but, I decided I better take a drive and think about it, So during that drive, I hit a curb and blew out a tire, and so I was staggering home, and I'm pretty sure the cops figured out what happened, because the cruiser rolls up on me, and he's like, "Where are you headed?" And I'm like, "Home." And he's like, "You want to lift?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, I got him." He gave me a ride home and dropped me off, and I walked in the door, and I opened it up, and Jeremy was standing there in front of the door looking up at me when I came to it, and he said, "Dad, when you're drunk, I hate you." And I felt like I was looking up at him, 6 years old, a little under. And so I definitely recognized there was a problem there. And I thought I might be able to do something about it. So I went down and I got an ADOTSA grant, and I went to a chemical addiction specialist, and we met a few times, and then I kind of kicked on my own that time, and I thought I was going to do great. I drank near beer for the first couple of weeks. I drank about a case or 2 a day. And, then I found the THC maintenance plan. And so I participated in that for quite some time. And I stayed sober for like 5 years. But I didn't do any growing, and I didn't do any self-improvement or anything. I was still the same bastard I was when I was drunk. And so what happened is that I worked for Shucks Automotive at the time, and I transferred from here to Helena, Montana, because they were bought out by a company called Northern Automotive, who also bought Checker Auto. And so I transferred to a Checker in Helena. And so when I got to Helena, the THC maintenance plan started getting a bit sketchy, because there's not near as much of that over there as there is over here. Well, maybe now there is, but then there wasn't. So things started getting, I couldn't always get my fix like that. And it was I felt the same unease when I wasn't able to get that substance as I did when I wasn't able to get alcohol. And so what happened is that I started drinking, binging a little bit. And so I had a next door neighbor, and his name was Tony, and we were kind of friendly. And he wasn't actually next door neighbor. We lived in an apartment building, and it was kind of a U shape like this. And I lived on this end, and he lived on this end. And I'm going to digress a little bit. I didn't hide things from my kids because my mom and dad used to, like go in the room to drink and stuff. Like we didn't know what was going on or something. And I always felt disrespected like that, so I didn't think I'd disrespect my children like that. So I drank and smoked and whatever else, in front of God and everyone. And so I was sitting there, and I had a box on my lap, and I was rolling a joint. And Tony came in, and he's like, "You're doing that shit in front of your kids?" And I looked at him, and my chair was sitting in such a position that I looked at him, and then I could look out the door, and I could see his apartment across the way. And I looked over, and I said, "Isn't that your apartment over there, Tony?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Why don't you get the fuck over there and run it then?" And he didn't take that too well, and he talked the owner into making him a resident manager there. So he started, he gave us a 10-day for having pets, and, there was a non-pet clause in the lease, and we had told the owner when we moved in, well, we got pets, and they're part of the family, He says, "Oh, don't worry about it. That's there for Section 8, We're like, okay, but then now it became a problem. And he made it very clear he was going to get us evicted. So I looked around for somewhere to move, and it was hard finding any place we might be able to afford. So I thought, well, I got to warn this guy off. Maybe I'll just kill him. And, I felt like I had the right to. He was making my life difficult. So I could not get him away from his wife and children. And I didn't want to just walk up and shoot him in the face in front of him. So I thought, well, I'll give him a warning first. So one Sunday morning about 4 a.m., I blew his car up. And, I thought, maybe local police would get interested or something. I was very dismayed to see the ATF there the next morning. So I was suspect one immediately, but they really didn't have much in the way of proof. And so they, I don't know how much you guys know about law enforcement, but there's this thing they call high-profile surveillance, which means they let you know they're surveilling you. They make sure you see them surveilling you. And they did that, and they applied a couple other pressure techniques. They were trying to get me to jackrabbit because that would help them prove their case, and I wasn't going for it. And so, I was always a very stubborn person. I'm still persistent, but hopefully not so stubborn. But what happened is at one point they brought me into their little ATF office in Helena, and the guy tells me, it's like, we got you, man, dead to rights. You may as well just fess up and stuff. And I said, if you got me dead to rights, I guess I don't need to fess up, do I? And then he said a few other things, and I said a few things, and he was getting a little testy. So he leaned on the desk and he says, "You don't seem to realize you're facing 10 years. And I'm thinking, the first time I was arrested on a felony many years ago, I was facing 30 years and I got 6. And so I'm doing some quick arithmetic in my head. 10 years? So I looked at him and I said, "Is that the best you got to threaten me with?" He turned purple. It was pretty funny. But so I was already not making friends there. And so then it was just about a month later that I guess they finally decided they had enough, and they filed what's called a criminal complaint because if law enforcement on a federal level anyway has a choice between seeking an indictment from a grand jury and filing a criminal complaint. And I think they file a criminal complaint because they have some doubt about their ability to gain an indictment from a grand jury. So, and they did have a very shaky case at the time. But then they busted a friend leaving. I had a friend help me make the bomb, by the way. So he was drinking with a friend, and the friend left his place and got the blue light special. And they took him into a room, and they said, "Hey, you know what? We're going to just throw the book, the gavel, and everything else at you, or you can take this bottle of whiskey back to Dave's," the other guy, his name was Dave also, "and get him talking while you're wearing this wire." So that's what he did. And they kicked in his door, and Dave had a cassette tape, those video cassettes, of him doing 80 different explosions, detonating explosive devices. Each of those was worth four felonies. And so, Dave was not, he didn't have as much experience with the law as I did. And so when they told him, "We can give you 3,600 years on that shit," he's like, he couldn't talk fast enough, And so he cooperated with him, and then they arrested me. They arrested me on my wife's birthday, and so when they arrested me, they had the ATF agent came to the front door, and he was wearing just a vest and his pistol and stuff, and had one city cop in the alley out behind in case I went out the back window or something, and they knew that I had 2 SKS rifles, 2 shotguns, and a .44 revolver. And you'll know why I'm telling you this in a minute. So when he arrested me, they took me in, and then it was within days I was in front of a magistrate for a bail hearing. And the court determined that I was a flight risk and a danger to the community. And I felt like the very circumstances of my arrest countered that, but as usual, a federal magistrate and I did not see eye to eye. So I went to jail, and I kept making friends there. And so when I finally went to court, the assistant U.S. attorney stands up, and this in Helena, Montana is the capital. So about 20% of the population when I was there were working for the state government or the federal government, and then probably 40% of the rest of them were related. So you had about 60% of the population that, the sun rose and set on the two governments. And the U.S. attorney stood up, and he's like, "Ladies and gentlemen, my name is so-and-so. I'm the Assistant United States Attorney. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm an attorney for the United States of America, for the state of Montana, for the county of Lewis and Clark, for the city of Helena. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm your attorney." That was it. It was really pretty much over at that point. So my lawyer did a very competent job, and I got convicted anyway. And so I went back to prison, and I spent, I walked off 5 calendars that time. And then when the judge sentenced me, he also gave me 63 months in and 36 months on supervised release. And I looked at him, I said, "Well, just keep that supervised release because I'm not doing it. Just leave me in the joint." And he looked at me and he said, "Mr. Ludden, I am statutorily compelled to give you this chance. However, I'm sure this court will see you again." And I told him, "Bank on it." And they took me out of the courtroom. And then so I'd also given the marshals a bunch of shit while they were transferring me and stuff. So they put a dangerous offender notice on my, what we call a jacket in that system. And so I was now a dangerous offender. And what they do with dangerous offenders is instead of just giving you the handcuffs, or what the feds usually do, the handcuffs with the waist chain and down to leg shackles, you also get this nice little black box to go over your cuffs, so you can't hardly move your hands or your arms. And they flew me around on Con Air for about 3 days before they finally dropped me off at Florence, Colorado. And man, I'm telling you, that was the worst days. I was so sore when they were over. And but I still didn't make any friends or make any attempt to. And I went to prison, and I just kind of did what I did, and I survived there and did so fairly well. And and I didn't have to affiliate with any idiots either. The first time I was there, I had a lot of Mexican friends, and in prison, people divide by race basically, and so I didn't see a lot of courage from my white brothers and sisters, and that's why I kind of affiliated with the Mexicans, and so we had a point in prison where this guy accidentally kind of told on me right in front of me and God and everybody. And in prison, you can't let people get away with stuff like that. So, and I had also filed suit because my violation was based on some. I filed for a fast and speedy appeal on my violation on the charges that got me, and they never gave it to me, so I was able to sue for lack of speedy trial and contest my violation as well. But just before that, this happened with this guy, and so when we went back to unit, I went up and I called him out, and we fought, and there was a lot of the black brothers did not appreciate it, and so I ended up in a fight in about a half a second fight with about 3 dozen. And it didn't take long before I was down and getting kicked around pretty good. Fortunately, it was right before 4 o'clock count. At 4 o'clock count, you had to be in a cell. It doesn't have to be your cell, just a cell. So, the sounds go off and they're like, 4 o'clock count. So I get up and I'm like, and I staggered into the nearest unit that wasn't occupied. And I'm sitting there looking out the window, so I got my back to the door. And they do the count, and then they come in. And then, of course, the guard knew what happened shortly after the count. I hadn't said anything to him, but he comes into my cell, and he's like, hey, David. And I was sitting there. I was talking to a friend. I had him sit, away from the door, so I'd have my back to the door. And I borrowed some shades from another friend. They were a little too big, but they were covering my face. And the guard says, "Hey, David." And I was like, "Hey, John." And he said, "Oh, you don't look at me when you talk to me anymore." So I faced him. I said, "Hey, John." And he's like, "Lift those glasses." And I went like this, And so he says, "Well, do you want to lock up?" And I'm like, "Are you fucking crazy?" No, I don't want to lock up. I didn't go through this to get locked up. And so anyway, making a long story short, the establishment knew without me telling them anything that what had happened, that I'd gotten in an altercation that turned into a more than one-on-one, and that I had not instigated that. But that evening also, 3 of the leaders of the Mexicans, the MA leader, the Chicano leader, and the Mexican leaders came to my cell, and they said, we know what happened to you, man. And if you want to ride, which meant have a riot, the Brown brothers are with you. And I looked at him and I said, man, I sure appreciate all that respect, but if we riot, the only person that wins is the man. He gets more guns, more training, more everything, and we're not serving ourselves. So I don't think that's a good idea. And they respected that, and that word got back to, so, wow, I almost had time already. I'm not even sober yet, damn it. Anyway, let me get sober quick. So I got out of there through no fault of my own. And I went back for another year, violating the supervised release. That was a foregone conclusion. And so it was later, and my daughter had asked me while I was still in prison. She was like 13, I think, when we talked, and she's like, so when you get out, what's going to happen? I said, well, I'm not going to be out that long because I'm going to have to go back. She's like, why do you have to go back? And I thought, she was being extremely innocent, but the question was so valid. When I finally got sober, that never went away from me, her asking me that. And today what has happened, thanks to being sober, is a couple of years ago, she posted on her Facebook account, she said, I know my dad feels really guilty about leaving us, but since he's got clean and sober, he's the best dad I could possibly ask for. And that was really cool. And so in my recovery, what happened is at first I went to Cedar Hills. I checked into detox, and after 5 days, they brought me downstairs and they're like, do you want to go home or go to treatment? And I'm thinking, geez, I don't want to go through that shit again. So I said, well, let's try treatment. So they held me 20 days before I went to treatment, and they only got paid by the county for 15 days. And I had seen people get told at 15 days they had to go home or somewhere else and wait for a bed to open up. So I was at the front desk on my 13th day, and I told them, please don't send me home. I'll never make it past that 7-Eleven at the bottom of the hill. And they didn't. They kept me there 20 days. That was a big gamble for them because it was about $150 a day. So they were gambling 5 times 150, $750 on me. And then they sent me to Cedar Hills. And when they were walking us around the campus and they were showing us, I saw this salamander go slithering through the grass. And I thought, that's cool. And he went under a dragonfly. And I was looking at him and I said, man, how long has it been since I noticed a salamander or a dragonfly, or anything like that? And I couldn't remember. So that was, to me, that was one of my earlier God shots, And so I had fallen in love with AA while I was still in detox too. We had panels that would come in weekly, and one of the guys said, if you show me a sober alcoholic, a grateful alcoholic, I'll show you an alcoholic who's not about to drink. And I thought, wow, that sounds awesome. So I started working some gratitude into my program. And like when guys would bitch about the burnt toast at breakfast, I'd tell them, at least you got toast. You ain't eating out of a dumpster this week, And I internalized that too. And when I didn't like the food much either, but it was food and it was free, and it kept me, it sustained me. So then I went to treatment, and I was all in from the beginning. We had groups that came in and met with us, and then groups that took us out to the meetings sometimes. And I joined the Wednesday Night of Your Life group in Maple Valley. And it was really cool walking into a police station and then leaving with no handcuffs coming on or going off, no pictures being taken. And then I moved after I got out of Cedar Hills, I moved to Renton. And I kept going to the Wednesday Night of Your Life as long as I could. But, my driver's license was suspended in 2 states, too. And so it took me 5 years and several $1,000s to change that, but I did eventually. And so I was taking the last bus running for the day to get to that part of Maple Valley. And then I'd have to catch a ride over to where you caught the buses that went into Seattle and Renton and all that good stuff. And it just became so much of a drag, I had to change my home group. And so then I was doing meetings at Harborview. Has it been 30 already? Oh gosh. Anyway, it's been 20 years. I've done a lot of service, and I found my soulmate, somebody who's an equal, who I love and respect deeply, and together we're both human beings now, and I don't have to be that asshole I used to be. And what I found is that the key to my relationship with my lovely wife is that I honor and respect her as at least my equal. And a lot of times my superior, because she's smarter than I am. So I want to thank you guys for listening to that. I didn't mean to give such a long drunkalogue. I hate that. I usually give a very short drunkalogue and a longer sobriety statement. But I want you guys to know that things I love about AA is seeing people come into meetings and, become at home like my suspect did. He came to our meeting and he was pretty skitsy, and he's like, I need a sponsor. And so I tried to find several others, and I finally found one guy who said he would, and then he ghosted him. So when I found out he ghosted him, I went ahead and took him on as a sponsor, even though I had quite a few. But that's how this program works. And I love watching people get their color back, their weight back or off or whatever, and get their life together. And I see people, the other thing is people that keep coming back, and then they come back and stick, and I love to see that. I really do. And so I love you guys, and thank you for letting me stand in front of you and talk too long.